Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video.
Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Black Juries and join us for more powerful.
Elijah Banks had not planned to stop at the Ashford Grand that night, but a canceled connecting flight in Denver had a way of rearranging a man's plans without asking his permission. It was 11:42 p.m. when the rideshare pulled up under the hotel's stone archway, and the temperature had dropped to 31 degrees, the kind of cold that gets into a person's joints and stays there. His daughter, Nora, 6 years old, had fallen asleep somewhere around the Kansas border, her cheek pressed against the window of the car, her small fingers still curled around a well-loved rabbit named Pepper, whose left ear had been stitched back on twice. Elijah lifted her out of the car seat without waking her, tucked her against his shoulder, and walked toward the revolving glass doors wearing the same gray zip-up hoodie and worn Timberland boots he'd had on since 6 that morning. He had not called ahead. He rarely did. The Ashford Grand was the flagship property of Banks Meridian Hospitality, the company Elijah had spent 14 years building out of a single 18-room motel off Route 9 in Macon, Georgia. He had personally chosen the marble for this lobby. He had personally interviewed the first general manager, and he had made it a private habit, one he never announced to his executive team, of showing up unannounced at his own properties, dressed exactly the way he was dressed now, plain, unhurried, easy to overlook. His late father, Robert Banks, had spent 26 years working the overnight desk at a Days Inn outside Atlanta, and something Robert used to say at the kitchen table had never once left Elijah's memory. A business shows you exactly who it is in the way it treats the person it thinks doesn't matter, not the person it's trying to impress. He crossed the lobby floor at 11:47 p.m. The front desk was staffed by a single clerk, a young man in his late 20s with a crisp navy blazer, drip-gelled hair parted with surgical precision, and a name tag that read Chad Welcome Desk Associate. Chad looked up from his monitor, and something in his face performed a quiet recalculation, the kind that doesn't announce itself with a sneer but arrives instead as a small closing of the eyes, a subtraction rather than an insult. "Evening," Elijah said quietly. "Careful not to jostle, Nora. One room, please. 2 guests. Doesn't need to be anything fancy." Chad's eyes drifted from the hoodie to the sleeping child to the absence of any visible luggage beyond a single backpack slung over Elijah's free shoulder. He let the full 3 socks pass before answering, the kind of pause that does the talking a person doesn't want to do out loud. "I'm sorry, sir, we're fully booked tonight." Elijah didn't argue. He simply asked nothing at all, not even a single queen. "Fully booked," Chad repeated, the words arriving smoother the second time, well worn from practice. "There's a Best Western about 2 miles east that should have availability." What Chad did not know, what he had a way of knowing, standing there under the recessed lighting he'd never once had to think about the cost of, was that the man in front of him wasn't to watch his own hotel laugh to his face, and that the next 6 minutes would end his employment before sunrise. At 11:51, the revolving doors spun again. A couple walked in, the man in a cashmere overcoat, the woman in heels that clicked against the marble with the particular confidence of people who have never once been told a hotel is full. They had no reservation. Chad's posture straightened instantly, his smile arriving warm and immediate, and within 4 minutes he had run their card, printed 2 key cards, and wished them a restful night. Elijah watched the entire exchange without moving, without speaking, cataloging it the way a man catalogs evidence he already suspects he'll need later. Nora stirred against his shoulder. "Daddy," she mumbled, barely awake. "Are we at the hotel yet?" "Almost, baby. Just give me 1 more minute." He turned back to the desk. His voice, when it came, was even and unhurried, the still emphasis of a man who has already decided he isn't going anywhere. "I'd like to speak with the manager on duty." Chad's mouth tightened. He picked up the desk phone, dialed 3 digits, and murmured something Elijah couldn't hear. The manager, when he arrived 2 minutes later, introduced a different kind of problem entirely. His name tag read Gordon Piersick, General Manager, and he wore a suit at midnight the way some men wear a badge, as though authority were something you kept polished on the outside, because there was nothing to back it up on the inside. He'd clearly been briefed on the walk over, because arrived at the desk already certain of his conclusion. "Sir," Gordon said, positioning himself beside Chad in a way that made the geometry of the moment plain. 2 main 10 on one side of the counter, 1 man and a sleeping child on the other. "I understand there's some confusion. My associate has already explained we have no availability tonight." "There's no confusion," Elijah said. "I watched your associate turn away a walk-in and then book a room for a different walk-in 4 minutes later. I'd like you to explain that." Gordon's jaw set. "My staff exercised appropriate judgment. I stand behind my team." For a long moment, Elijah said nothing at all. He thought about his father's uniform, the elbows gone thin from 26 years of leaning against a counter, just like this one, and about the particular quiet his father used to carry home at 4 in the morning, a tiredness that had nothing to do with sleep. He thought about how close he was standing, right now, to finding out whether the standard he'd built this company on had actually survived the 14 years since he'd stopped watching it every single day. He was not going to reveal who he was, not yet. He needed to see exactly how far this would go. "I'd like your full name and title, for my own records," Elijah said. Gordon supplied both without an ounce of warmth, and Elijah stepped back from the counter, found a seat in the lobby sitting area, and settled Nora against his chest to wait. He did not have to wait long. Gordon did not return to his office. He stationed himself near the desk, arms folded, glancing toward Elijah every 90 seconds or so, with the expression of a man watching a stain he can't yet figure out how to remove. Elijah noticed the young woman working the concierge station. Her name tag read, Grace go very still, her hand stopping mid-motion over a stack of paperwork she was no longer actually organizing. He noticed a couple at the lobby bar lower their glasses slightly, their attention drifting his way without quite committing to it. A hotel lobby at midnight has its own kind of silence, and this one had started to develop the particular texture of a room where everyone senses something wrong is happening and is waiting for someone else to be the one who says so first. At 12:08 a.m., Gordon crossed the floor. "Sir," he said, his voice dropped to a register on screen, still carrying to everyone nearby. "I've given you some time, and I need to be direct. This is private property. You've been informed we have no availability. Continuing to occupy this lobby isn't something we're going to allow." "I'm sitting in a chair," Elijah said. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't caused a single disruption." "I'm not asking," Gordon said. He turned and gave a short nod toward the far corridor, where 2 security guards had apparently been waiting for exactly that signal. They crossed the lobby with the unhurried heaviness of men who had performed this particular routine more times than they'd like to count, and positioned themselves on either side of Elijah's chair. That was the exact moment Nora woke up. She came back to consciousness the way 6-year-olds do, not gradually, but all at once, blinking into the light, taking in the guards, the tension coiled in her father's shoulders, and Gordon's expression, all in a single unhurried sweep. She sat up straighter, clutching Pepper to her chest, and looked directly at Gordon with the frank, unfiltered curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she doesn't see what she plainly sees. "Why are you making us leave?" she asked. Her voice carried the particular clarity small voices have in quiet rooms, reaching the bar, the concierge desk, the elevator bank. Gordon did not answer her. He looked instead at Elijah, which was its own kind of answer entirely. Nora considered this with the methodical seriousness of a child working through a math problem that refuses to add up. "If they don't want us here," she said, "why do they work here? Isn't that their job to help people?" There was no accusation in the question. That was precisely what made it land so hard. The couple at the bar had both turned fully now. Even one of the security guards shifted his weight, visibly uncomfortable with where his own feet had landed him. Elijah looked down at his daughter, kept his voice warm, and level the way he always did when he wanted her to understand the world's disorder was never heard doing. "You didn't do a single thing wrong, Nora. Not one thing." He straightened and looked back at Gordon, whose certainty had cracked slightly not into doubt, but into irritation at having his authority questioned by an audience he hadn't wanted. Some men, when they feel control slipping, only tighten their grip. "This has gone on long enough," Gordon said. "Please escort them out." The guard on the left stepped forward. Elijah rose slowly, careful with Nora, and did not resist, but he did not move toward the door either. Several phones had quietly appeared throughout the lobby, angled his way without ceremony, capturing the specific geometry of the moment. A black father in a gray hoodie, his daughter clutching a stuffed rabbit, 2 security guards, manager who had already decided how the night would end. Elijah reached into his hoodie pocket, found a number, pressed call, and brought the phone to his ear. The call lasted 41 seconds. He spoke 5 sentences, listened for perhaps 8, and ended it. "Daddy," Nora whispered just for him. "Do we have to go?" "Not tonight," Elijah said. "We're not going anywhere." Gordon opened his mouth for what would be his final ultimatum. "Sir, I am telling you." The elevator chimed. It was an ordinary sound the lobby produced dozens of times a night without anyone noticing, but every single person in that room noticed this one. The doors opened and Diane Kessler stepped out, Chief Operating Officer of Banks Meridian Hospitality. Silver-streaked hair still damp from a shower she'd clearly cut short, a blazer thrown on over a t-shirt she hadn't had time to change out of. Behind her were 2 members of the regional's executive team, moving with the barely contained urgency of people who understood exactly the weight of what they were walking into. Diane crossed the marble floor directly to Elijah. She did not look at Gordon. She did not look at Chad. She stopped in front of Elijah and said, with a formality that carried real and immediate weight, "Mr. Banks, I am so sorry you were kept waiting." The lobby did not go silent the way rooms do in films, loudly, all at once. It went silent the way rooms do in life, one small sound peeling away at a time, until nothing remained but the soft piano loop from the lobby speakers, which suddenly felt entirely wrong for the moment it was underscoring. Diane turned to face the front desk. "This is Elijah Banks," she said. "Founder and sole owner of Banks Meridian Hospitality. He owns this hotel. He owns the desk you're standing behind, the uniforms you're wearing, and the paychecks that determine whether you're working here tomorrow." She let that settle for exactly one breath. "I want everyone in this lobby to be completely clear about what happened here tonight." Chad had gone the color of the countertop in front of him. Gordon stood frozen in the center of the floor, a man whose entire understanding of the last 20 minutes had just been rebuilt from the foundation up, with no idea yet what to do inside the new version of it. Nora looked up at Diane, then at her father, then back at Diane. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you know this lady?" Elijah looked down at his daughter, and for the first time since walking through those revolving doors, something in his face softened. "Yeah, baby," he said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I know this lady." What happened over the next 11 minutes was the thing Elijah would remember most clearly, more than the humiliations itself. The complete absence of emotion in a room that only minutes earlier had been building towards something loud. Gordon hadn't moved. Chad had both hands flat against the counter as though he needed it to hold himself upright. Gordon found his voice first, which was either brave or foolish, and turned out to be both. "Mr. Banks, I want to explain. We had no way of knowing the circumstances." "You're right," Elijah said before Gordon could finish. "You didn't know who I was. That's the entire point." His voice carried across the lobby without effort, because everything else in the room had gone so quiet it didn't need to travel far. "Everything you did tonight, you did because you looked at me and decided I wasn't worth the standard. Not because of anything I said. Because of what I looked like walking through that door. And you did it in front of my daughter." Before Gordon could answer, a woman near the lobby bar rose from her stool. She was perhaps 60, traveling alone, a paperback still open on the counter behind her. "Mr. Banks," she said, "I don't think you remember me. But 3 years ago, at your property in Savannah, a manager tried to seat my late husband and me at a table by the kitchen because of how we were dressed after a long drive. Somebody higher up overrode it without being asked. I never forgot that. I still stay at your hotels because of it." She glanced at Gordon. Whatever this man just did, it isn't what your name stands for. A second voice came from near the elevator bank, a man in hotel maintenance coveralls, badge reading maintenance, who had been quietly reaching towel carts nearby. I've worked under 3 different GMs at this property, he said. First time I've seen one turn away a paying guest and lie about it to his face. Wanted that on the record, Mr. Banks. And Danks, then Gray, still standing at the concierge, spoke without being asked, her voice unsteady but clear. I saw the whole thing, she said. I didn't say anything because I've watched Mr. Pierce write people up for less than raising a concern. That's not an excuse. I wanted you to know I saw it. Elijah listened to all 3 without interrupting, without shifting his expression. Take careful inventory of a room, finally telling him the truth about itself. Gordon attempted one more sentence, and it didn't make it to a period. I stand behind my Gordon, Elijah said quietly. You're terminated, effective immediately. Gordon's face settled into something gray and inward. Whatever argument remained in him, he chose not to spend it. He straightened his jacket, a small, automatic gesture, the last intact piece of dignity a man could still reach for, and walked toward the back office without another word. Chad was next. Elijah crossed to the front desk slowly, giving the younger man time to understand what was coming. You made a choice tonight based on how someone looked, Elijah said. I want you to sit with that, not with what it's about to cost you professionally, but with what it actually means to be on the other side of a decision like that. He kept his voice even, not unkind. I'm not ending your career here. But you're going into a full retraining program before you touch another front desk, not policy training, values training. If you come out the other side and still want to work in hospitality, the door stays open. But a night like this cannot happen again. Not to you, not to anyone. Chad nodded, a small movement, but a real one. Elijah turned to Grace last. You saw it and you couldn't say anything, he said quietly, just for her. I understand is exactly why the structure here made that difficult, and that's a failure of leadership, not of character. He paused. But I watched you tonight. Something in you knew exactly where the line was, even when you couldn't cross it. Starting tomorrow, you're being considered for a supervisory role in guest services, because I need people in this company who are in a position to act on what they already know is right. Grace's eyes moved through several things at once before landing on something between relief and resolve. I won't let you down, she said. I know, Elijah said simply. He turned back to face the room, the remaining guests, the maintenance worker, the woman with her paperback, all watching him openly now. No pretense left, no phones held up. Just be people waiting to hear what came next. I've been building hotels for 14 years, Elijah said, and there's exactly one standard I've never negotiated on. Every person who walks through our doors gets treated with respect, not based on what they're wearing, not based on what they look like, not based on whether they seem like they belong in a place like this. Every person, every time, without exception. He looked around Allah once more. At the desk, his father had never once been allowed to stand behind as anything but an employee. If anyone in this building can't commit to that, I'd genuinely rather you find somewhere else to work. That's not a threat. That's just the truth of what this company is. The room held those words for a moment. Then Nora, still holding Pepper under one arm, with the serious, focused expression of a 6-year-old determined to understand the world correctly, tugged once on her father's hand. Daddy, she said, can we get our room now? I'm really tired. Something moved through the lobby. That wasn't quite laughter, was close enough to it, the particular release a room finds when tension finally has somewhere to go. Even Diane pressed her lips together against a smile. Yeah, baby, Elijah said, looking down at his daughter's stubborn, earnest face. We're getting our room. 6 months later, on an unremarkable Wednesday afternoon at 2:14 p.m., a family walked through the same revolving doors, 2 exhausted parents in travel clothes, 2 kids trailing behind them, one of them dragging a duffel bag twice his size and refusing all offers of help with the absolute conviction of a child who has decided this is a matter of personal principle. Grace was working the front of house that day. She crossed the lobby to meet the family before they'd even reached the desk, introduced herself by name, and asked how she could make their stay easier. She didn't glance at their shoes or their luggage. She looked at the tired eyes and the stubborn id, and she smiles the way people smile, some it when they mean it completely. Within 3 minutes, the parents' shoulders had come down. Within 6, even the boy with the duffel bag had let someone carry it for him. In the far corner of the lobby, Elijah stood with Nora beside him, in for a scheduled visit this time. Wearing a blazer instead of a hoodie, though, Nora had still insisted on bringing Pepper. They had been standing there for nearly 10 minutes, watching, before Elijah made his presence known to the floor, because he wanted to see this part first, the ordinary, unrimmable version of the thing he'd spent 14 years trying to build. Nora watched Grace guide the family toward the desk, watched the kids brighten at something Grace said that made them both laugh. "Is that what it's supposed to look like?" Nora asked. Elijah watched the tired parents finally exhale. "Yeah, baby," he said. "That's exactly what it's supposed to look like." Nora considered this with the quiet thoroughness she brought to most things, nodded once, tucked Pepper under her arm, and reached up to take her father's hand. They stood there together in the corner of the lobby he had built, watching it finally become, in full, the thing he had always meant it to be. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity before they've had to prove a single thing, before they've shown you what they have, before you've decided whether they belong. That isn't just good business. That's just what's right. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.